I'm Liz Wager, I'm a freelance consultant and trainer, and I've been taking part in a project called OPEN, which stands for Overcoming the Failure to Publish Negative Findings, and it's been funded by the European Union. And I worked with my colleague Pete Williams at University College London, and we wanted to look particularly at the policies of journals and the views of editors about trial registration. And there are a number of reasons why trial registration is really important, and it's particularly related to the problem of publication bias. We know that a great many studies simply don't get published, so we don't know what the results are. We also know that people tend to select the good bits, the positive findings, and not always publish the negative findings. And that of course can skew the evidence base and make it unreliable, and in the end lead to decisions being unreliable if they're based on a skewed evidence base. Trial registration isn't actually a new idea. It was mooted back in the 1980s, in fact, but it really got a boost in 2004 when the members of the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or ICMJE, announced that from 2005 they would only publish studies that had been properly registered. Now, the ICMJE are usually the big major national medical journals such as the BMJ or the Journal of the American Medical Association and some other big journals like the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine. But we knew from our experience and from a few smaller studies that a lot of the smaller journals didn't require registration. We know that journal policies are important because when the ICMJE made their announcement, there was actually quite a big spike in the number of trials that got registered in the main US database, clinicaltrials.gov. And this was one of the reasons that we wanted to look at other journals' policies to see if they were encouraging authors to register their studies. So this was a two-part study. In the first part, we looked at the journal websites of 200 journals that we'd selected at random from the Cochrane Central Database. So this was a wide range of journals, probably small and medium-sized, who we knew were publishing clinical trials. And the second half of the project was a qualitative assessment to ask the journal editors and publishers the reasons why they had a requirement for trial registration or why they didn't. And we particularly focused on journals that had changed their policy recently because we thought then the arguments and the reasons would be fresh in their mind. The first part of the study, so we looked at the 200 journals, we found that only 28% of them required trials to be registered, made it a requirement for publication. So 3/4 of these journals didn't require it. When we then asked the editors why they had these policies, they gave us a variety of reasons. One of them said, "We are competing with rival journals, and until the rival journals make it mandatory, why would I want to bar what is potentially quite interesting papers to us just because we have got higher standards than the rest of them?" Another editor said to us, "We're probably a mid-level journal, so we usually don't get the primary papers, so I don't think it's that big a deal." Another, describing a small randomised study involving patients, so a proper clinical trial, but perhaps involving a licensed rather than an experimental product, said, "Well, technically that's a clinical trial, but it seems hardly worth the effort to register." And it was that quote that gave us the title of the paper. We called it "Hardly Worth the Effort" because it seemed that the journal editors didn't seem prepared to take this small step, which might encourage registration and improve the reporting standards in their journals. Another of the editors really explained in a way how editors don't appreciate the benefits and don't understand the importance of trial registration. This person said to us, "There's also this notion that trial registration will reduce underreporting, but I really don't see how trial registration would make it more likely that a negative study which should be published will be published." We do recognise that trial registration isn't the only thing. It can't force people to publish a study, but it gives a much stronger indication that a study has started, and therefore it's much easier. You have contact details, you can contact the funder or the investigator, and you can follow it up if it doesn't get published. It also thinks about the issue of selective reporting and misleading reporting. So say, for example, a study claimed that it was going to look at the effects of a treatment after 6 months, but then maybe the results were less convincing and they got more positive or more statistically significant results at 3 months, and then they might in the publication only report the 3-month outcome. But if the trial had been registered, you'd be able to tell that actually that wasn't the primary outcome and that the design hadn't really been accurately reported. While we realise that some academics and researchers may not be fully aware about trial registration yet, it is perhaps surprising and shocking that journal editors, who you hope would be experts and you hope would really understand the problems of publication bias, don't seem to be aware of it. In fact, one of the peer reviewers, Surian Chalmers from the James Lind Library, commented on the fact that the journal editors, in their either ignorance or lack of understanding or lack of being convinced about trial registration, really were going in the face of the evidence, because there's a great deal of evidence to show that registration can have beneficial effects.